In this video, we learn local properties and data binding. Let's go to our VS Code and try to understand first the properties and then the local properties. So now we'll go to our hello world.js, the component that we created, and we already know each component is a class. In our case, the hello world is our class. So the class contains usually two things, the properties and the methods. And to a layman, the properties are the fields, or you can say a variable that store the data in layman term. Okay, so if I create some field here, name, so this is a property. Okay, then you can create an age, this is a property, and you can initialize this property with the value using equal to. Right, so these are the properties, and these properties are only available inside this particular class. That's why we call them as a local property. You can't access these variable outside this class. So these are the local properties. So let's try to understand what all types of property you can create. You can create a normal property without initializing anything, so by default this will be undefined. You can create the property with the number. You can create the property with the name. I'll create a property full name and I'll say Salesforce India or anything. And then you can create, we created a number, we created a string, you can create the boolean. Show data is my property name and I can initialize it as false or true. This is a boolean. And many people ask, do we need to enter the semicolon? It's not required, but if you want and you like to add that, you can add that. Okay, so in JavaScript it doesn't matter. Then we can create an objects as well. So if I create a property details, and detail can have many things. Detail can have name, dummy, then place, Melbourne. So this is an object format, right? And I can create array as well, user list. I have a user A, I have a user B, I have a user C. Likewise, you can create any type of data and assign it to a property. So there is no limitation on creating this. So this is the property and these are the local properties right now. So now the second topic of our this video is the data binding. So till now we have seen how to create the properties and how to initialize the value to the properties and what all different types of values you can assign. So let's go to our slide and try to understand first data binding. So data binding in the Lightning Web Component is the synchronization between the controller and the template. So template here is our HTML and the controller is our JavaScript. So if I create a property full name and I'll assign a value. Now if I want this data that I have assigned to my local property, that is full name, to show on the screen, that is HTML, right? So I have to use these flower brackets or the curly bracket and I have to bind that property. So whatever the value assigned to the property will be visible on the screen. So this is called data binding, the synchronization between the controller and the template, and it's a one-way data binding. So data is flowing from JS to HTML, and these are the expression bracket. We call these brackets are expression bracket. So in HTML, whenever we want to bring something from JavaScript, we use these brackets. So let's go and see this in a demo. So now I'm in my JS. I'll remove all the properties that I have created and create a new property, and I'll create a new property called full name, and I'll initialize this value as 020, and I'll go to the HTML, and if I want to bind this data to an HTML, we need to use this flower bracket, and I'll call this property name as it is in between those flower bracket. So now automatically LWC is intelligent enough, it do the binding behind the scene. It takes the JavaScript variable and bind it with the HTML, and here it will print 0 to hero on the screen. Let's go and deploy this. And now you guys already know how to deploy. To deploy, you again need to write the same command, sfdx force source colon push, and hit enter. So now the component is deployed. Let's go to our page and see whether it's printing the right data or not. Earlier the hello world was hard coded in the HTML. Now we are bringing the data from JS to an HTML using the data binding. And now you can see that 0 to hero is printing on the screen. So this is how data binding works, and this is how we create the properties, and these properties are the local properties. We'll talk more about the global properties or the public properties later on. So few things are very important to keep in mind while using the data binding. So in template we can access property value directly if it is primitive or object. So primitive or object means like primitives are the boolean value, string value, number values, and objects you already know, but you can't directly bring the values of an object. Okay, it will throw an error. So if I have a property, I'll go back to my VS Code and I will say I have a users, and I have user A, user B, and I want to bind this data. Like you already know from our JavaScript lecture, like array works with the index 0 1. So if I want the first value of an array, I can't bind like this on the screen. Users of 0, it's not allowed in LWC. Okay, only but for object you can do that. For if I create an object and I'll initialize it with the name Nikhil, and I'll want to use this, I can use the dot notation obj.name. So this is a valid syntax. That's why it says you can either use a primitive, that is a direct value like string, number, or boolean, or the objects, but you can't use the arrays. This thing you need to remember. And to use the object, dot notation is being used to access the property. Just now I showed you. Then LWC doesn't allow computed expression like name 2 and 2 plus 2. Yes, that's what I showed you earlier. So suppose you have 2 plus 2, it's not allowed, and we'll talk about this in the upcoming videos. And in upcoming videos I'll show you how you can achieve these scenarios in other ways. And then the properties in the flower bracket must be a valid JavaScript identifier or a member expression, like I showed you name and user.name. And always try to give the space around the properties. Sometimes it behaves weird, so always try to write your data without any spaces. That's just a suggestion. You can write it, but sometimes it behaves weird. So these things are you need to remember when you are creating the properties and binding the properties. So in next video we'll learn how to achieve the two-way data binding. Right now we have seen controller to HTML. In next video we'll see from HTML to controller as well. I'll see you in the next video. In this video we'll learn about methods and two-way data binding. So to understand the methods, let's go to our VS Code. So in the previous video, we saw how to create the properties and why we need the properties. Now we'll talk about methods. And as I said in the previous video, class consists of properties and the methods. So second thing is method, and methods are functions. So to create the methods, you need to use like method name, that is get name. Suppose my method name is get name. Here the function are without keyword if I have to be more specific in terms of method, and get name is my method, and here I'm gonna perform my logic. So there are two ways this method gets called. First way is you can call this method from the HTML, and the second way is you can call this method from the class itself. So I can call this method using this dot get name, Okay, and right now directly you can't call it because you need to use either a lifecycle hook like on load. Right now we haven't learned about this, so I'll not go into this, but just remember methods are the functions that we're going to use inside the class, and these functions can be called through HTML or through inside the JS file as well. So we know now methods, and to achieve the two-way data binding we need methods. So to work on the two-way data binding, first we need to understand what is two-way data binding. So let's go to a slide and try to understand two-way data binding. So in the previous video we saw how I'm passing the data from JavaScript to an HTML, but now I want whenever user change something on the screen that is on HTML, my property should update in the JavaScript as well. So that is two-way binding, the binding from JS to HTML and HTML to JS back. So look at this example. The green part is the controller. So we created the two properties. First is full name, initialized with the Salesforce true. Second value is second property is title, and I initialize it with the Salesforce developer. When the user load the page, it will see my name is Salesforce Troop and my title is admin, right? Because the binding is happening right now from JS to HTML. So in the curly bracket, all the properties get replaced with the value of JavaScript, right? So my name is Salesforce Troop and my title is Salesforce Developer. But suppose there is an input field on change or on type something in that field, we are updating the title and the user type title or admin in that particular field. Now immediately we gonna update the title property from Salesforce developer to the admin, and on the HTML also it will look like my title is admin. So the to and fro of the data is two-way data binding. It's not by default, we are achieving it. So Salesforce not supporting two-way data binding by default, but we can achieve the two-way data binding using this approach. So let's go to the Java or VS Code and see how it works. So I'll remove this right now. So we have our property full name. I'll create a title and I initialize it with Aura. Okay, and on the HTML, what I'm gonna do is I'll say a div tag and I'll say first bind the full name is a course of, and I'll bind LWC, right? I'll comment this first line, and to comment this you can press Control and backslash, or this is the way how you comment in the HTML part. So right now we have two properties. First is full name, second is the title, and we are just binding that data. So once it get binded, it will look like 0 to hero is a course of Aura, right? So it should be title. Title is the property in the JS, right? So till here it's all okay, but I want to update this title field, and to do that I have to create the input field, and in HTML we have seen input type equal to text. This is how you create the form element text field, and we can create the event like on click, on change, on key up. So here I am using an event called on key up, and as soon as the user type and its keys get up, we call the method change handler. This is the method name, and this method should be present in our JS file. So now we're gonna create our method change handler, and as soon as user start typing, it gets called up. I'll close my input field, and once this gets called up, it will receive an event. Event comes as a feedback from HTML to JS. It receives so many properties in it. Event is an object by default, and what will say we want to update the title. So whenever you are accessing a property inside the class, you need to use this dot property name. In our case, our property name is title and we want to update the title. And what by which we want to update. We want to update with the value that is coming from this input field, and to extract the value that user has typed, you can use event dot target dot value. So under the event there is a target object, and the target object holds a value property that will contain the value that user has typed in the input field. So suppose user typed hello, here it comes hello, and the title property gets updated. So the binding is happening from started from here. The title goes and bind it here in this div. Then the user start changing something in HTML. It comes to the JavaScript. It update the property. It update the property here. Once the values get updated, it go back to HTML and update the title here. So this is how two-way data binding works. Let's go to the terminal and deploy our component. So the command is remain same, sfdx force colon source colon push. Hit enter. So now the component has been deployed. Let's go to our web page and refresh this. So now you can see it here. The data binding is happening correctly. 0 to hero is a course of Aura, and as soon as I type LWC, it's updating the below value here. Now you see, this is how two-way data binding works. So if I start typing, it start updating the binded data. But right now this our input field is not looking good. Our text is not looking good because we have not used the style. And to solve this purpose, Salesforce given us two options. First is they said I already have a component library for you guys, and you don't need to worry about the styling. You always search before writing something in my library, and to do that you need to go to Google. In Google you type Salesforce component library, and now select the first link. So whenever you are starting building some components and you have some design that is already available, just copy paste the code from here only. So we want a card component first, because I don't want that bluish background and all, so I'll always use a card. So on the left hand side you type the component name. I said card. Here you will get the code and you will see how it looks like. Okay, you just copy paste this code, and we'll go back to our VS Code. I'll just paste it below. So I'll try to explain you this code first. So we are creating the card. The lightning card is the component, standard component given by Salesforce. It said what the title you are looking for. So I'll say two-way data binding. We don't need any button. We don't need anything in between the cards. So we just need the card, and I'll just copy paste our whole code inside the card. And let's deploy this again. Go to the command and run sfdx force push. Deployed. Let's go to our org, refresh the page. Now you can see we are getting at least a good look of the card. But now the other thing, this input field is not look like a standard Salesforce input field. And for the same thing, Salesforce says you go to my component library, search for again the field. I'll say input. Now you can see that under the Lightning Web component you have an input field. Select this input field, and here you can see different types of input field: date field, color field. We need only the text field where the user can type the text. And you go down, you can copy paste this code of input field, and we can go back to our VS Code. We'll replace our input field with the standard input field given by the Salesforce. Enter. I'll give the label name course. Enter course name, and I'll just replace on key up method and add it to our new lightning input. I'll remove the older one. So now we are using Salesforce specific styling. because this you're gonna use heavily in your real-time projects as well, and this is how it works in real industries as well. So now we have Salesforce styling. Let's deploy our code again. So any component that start with lightning hyphen, just remember that is a standard component given by Salesforce, and it's deployed. Let's go back to our page. So now you can see the heading label is coming, input field is coming like a Salesforce standard specific, but still it's touching next to the card. We need to give some CSS. Until now we haven't learned the CSS, and to solve this issue, Salesforce has given us another library, and that is integrated by default to our Lightning Web Component, that is SLDS. Let's go to Google and search about it. Here you type Salesforce Lightning Design System and select the first option. So in our CSS video, we saw how to apply this library. If you skip that video, I'll explain it again. So here we want to apply some margin. So search margin here, go to the margin page. Here it's a pre-written CSS. You just need to call the class names. So here it's like you want to apply to the margin to the top of small size, but we are looking the equal margin around. So there is a around class here, location around, and we are looking for applying a medium style. So I'll copy paste this class and go back to our VS Code, and I'll say I'll create a div and apply this class and wrap our whole content under this. So it will not allow the content to be touched with the card. And let's deploy this again. So if you are getting this error, you just add SLDS hyphen where. Recently they introduced the new naming convention, but it's not updated on the site. So this will solve your that underline error. And once it's deployed, let's go to our page and refresh the page. And now you can see it looks more cleaner. We are giving the equal spacing around it, and it's still working. As I start typing, the below text is updating perfectly. That is our title. So I'll repeat it. We did couple of things, and so in this video we talked about methods, how to create the methods. So I created a method called change handler. Then we are learning about two-way data binding, because one-way data binding is binding the data from JavaScript to HTML, but we were looking for an approach by which if I start typing something in the HTML, my data should update the JS as well. To do that, we have created an input field. We use the Salesforce standard input field. To that, we added a event handler, that is on key up. As soon as you start typing each key in the input field, it called the change handler. Change handler will receive the data that you have typed, and it replaces the data under the title property. And always whenever we have to access a property, we need to use the this keyword. So this dot property you have to call if you want to access a property. And we use the lightning card for the designing purpose only, and we have used the SLDS class to give you some margin around it. So these are the classes by which you can avoid writing your own CSS, and these libraries are inbuilt within the Lightning Web Components. So this is all about two-way data binding and the methods. And in the next video, we'll talk about track properties. I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we learn about track properties. So let's see what is track property exactly. So when a field contains an object or an array, there is a limit to the depth of changes that are tracked. These tracking are done by the LWC engine behind the scene. So to tell the framework to observe the changes to a properties of an object or to the elements of an array, we need to decorate the field with the @track. So let's go to VS Code and try to decode this statement. So till now, we have learned only the two-way data binding with the string, right? So our property is normal property. We initialize it with the string 0 to hero, and here also the title was aura, and that too also string. So let's create another property, address, and this time let it be a object. This time we are creating an object, address, and address can have city Melbourne, and we can add other things like postcode, and I can add country as well, another property. So now I have an object, right? So first thing we need to understand the difference between the values and the object properties, right? So value is something that you assign directly after equal to symbol. So object is a value for the address property. Here aura is the value for the title property, and 0 to hero is the value for the field property, or for a property or for a field. So field and properties are interchangeable in the reference. Okay, so now we have an address property. Now I'm assigning this object as a value to that address property, and this object has key value pair, key city and value Melbourne, key postcode value 3008, key country and value Australia. So when I am updating a particular field inside the object, it's not tracked by default by LWC engine. Like in our case, when we are updating the value directly, it was immediately tracked and update the HTML. So in our previous example, whenever I'll changing something in my course name, it calls the event handler, it assigns the value to title, and wherever the title has been used in the HTML, that value gets updated. But that case will not work if we update a single property of an object. The problem is, by default, LWC engine tracks the value that is directly assigned to a property. So let's see in example what I'm trying to say here is, let me copy paste the above code as it is below this. So now we are learning at the rate track properties, and here also we need a input field. So I'll say enter city name. I'll add a event handler, that is track handler. You can give any name, so I'm adding track handler. I'll go to the JS field. Below this I'll create a method track handler. So as soon as you type something in the input field, it also sends us an event. And now we want to update the property address.city, and to do that we'll say this dot address.city, and now we want to update it with the value event.target.value. So as soon as you type something, it comes in the form of event.target.value, and we are updating the property that belongs to the address object. Okay, so here this is a particular property within the address object. This is not the direct value of an address object. We are updating the particular property of the address object here. And now on the screen I'll say address.city is my city. Okay, so by default when the component loads, it will show Melbourne is my city because address.city is initialized with the Melbourne. And when I start typing, we are assuming it should update the value of the city, and that city should be updated in the div tag. So let's deploy this. So now on the screen you can see our second card is ready. It's asking enter the city name, and by default it's saying Melbourne is my city. Right, so I'll type New York and nothing is changing. That's the problem when we go with the complex data types like object and array, and LWC engine will not update this. And this, to solve this problem, we come up with the @track that track down all the property that are nested So let's go to our VS Code back and let's import that power. So to import the property, we'll say I need a track power from LWC module, and we need to decorate our property with the @track. So basically @track is a decorator, and decorator means in JavaScript is a function wrap another property or function, and that function gives some extra power to that particular property or method. So in our case, we are wrapping our address with a @track, which says to our engine, okay, address has already track. I need to always keep an eye in all the properties that is inside the address property or address object. So now if I deploy this again and see, it start updating the value automatically. We haven't changed anything in the HTML as well as in the JS. Now we are back to our page. If I say New York, now you can see it's updating. So this is where @track is helpful when you are using array or object. It's always good to track down your properties if you are using this approach of updating. But in real time, I never follow this approach because JavaScript says you should not mutate the data. You should always generate a new copy. And to avoid that, there is nothing wrong, but that's the principle that I follow. And to avoid the track, I can ignore track for time being. And instead of updating the object, I can generate a new copy of the object and update the address object. To do that, I'll say I want a new copy, and to generate the new copy, we can use the spread operator. So I'll say I'll spread all the property that is inside the address object, and I can add the new property to it, that is city. And if you don't know how this spread operator works, please watch my JavaScript section. In that I'm explaining the spread operator pretty well. So now what will happen is it will spread all the properties, city, postcode and country will spread out here. And on the right side, it will see, okay, one property is coming city. If that property is already available in on the left hand side address object, it gets override. So we get a new city value in the object and we are assigning those value directly to the address. So whenever the direct value gets updated, automatically our LWC engine re-renders. He don't need to think of @track or anything because we are updating directly the property, not the field of that property, right? So we are not updating the city and postcode, we are updating the whole object. So now if I deploy it, you will see our address again, city will update automatically. You don't need to use that track in this form. Let's go to our app page and you can see now I'll start typing New York or something else. You can use any city name. So it's updating, and here I haven't used anything track. But if you feel more complicated with this way, you always have @track, and to use @track you need to import the track from the LWC package. Many people start using it but forgot to import it. So always remember you need to import that track from the LWC package and you can use that. So here we can say directly, I'll take it back to the previous code. So event.address.city equal to event.target.value. So this is how our track works, and this is how it updates the value, because track help them to understand if any nested property has been updated or not. The same thing works with the array as well. So if you have an array list and I'll say A, B and C, and you want to update this array list, then you need to update in two ways. Either you make it as a track, @track, and then you can use it in this way, user list of 0 or 1, whichever index you want to update the value, then you can update. But if you forgot to add the track, it will not update the value on the HTML if you are using any value of user list. So always remember, when you are using object or array, use @track, otherwise directly update the value of the property, not the specific field inside that object you are updating. So let's go back to a slide quickly. So let's see normal property versus @track property actual difference. So without using the @track, the framework observes the changing that assigns a new value to a field property, and if the new value is not triple equal to the previous value, the components re-renders. So this is what we have just discussed. So in the next video, we're gonna learn about getters. So I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're gonna talk about getters. So getter is very powerful feature in LWC, and we're gonna use it a lot in real-time projects as well. So first, what was the need of getter? Actually, we need to understand, when everything was there, track was there, and other properties were there, be able to render the data in the HTML. So what was the need of the getter? So let's see the problem first. So in the first diagram, on the right hand side in JavaScript, I have an array of values, and I have some other properties, that is like num1 and num2, which has value 10 and 20. If I want to execute expression in the HTML, it was not allowed in LWC. And in the starting video itself, I told you, like, you can't run the expression, you can't run the array expression as well. You can run object, but array or some operation you can't perform in the template. So if there is a case where I need to do some multiplication or something, how I'm gonna achieve it? To solve this purpose, we come up with a getter. What getter said, you perform in JavaScript your operation, I'll bind your data back to your template, and it automatically bind it. You don't need any action or anything to update this. As soon as a particular value change, it keeps an eye and it update the template. And getter always start with a get keyword. So if in a method you append a get keyword in front of a method, it become a getter, and getter always returns something. So remember these things, like getter always a method that is appended by a get keyword, and getter method always returns something, and getter is used to show a manipulated data or a updated data on the screen. So let's go to our code and try to understand the getter. So now I'm in my VS Code, and I already commented out the codes to get a better clarity. So above code is for first data binding, second one is for @track. Now we're gonna learn getters. And to learn the getters, what I'm gonna do, I'll create another card. I'll just copy paste the same card below, and I'll remove everything from the center. So we have a lightning card. I'll say getter demo, and within this we have a div that is giving a margin around our card. So to understand the getter, first understand the problem that we were facing. So let's say I have a property called users, and that users containing a list of names. So John, Smith, or I can say Nick, or some names are there. And the requirement is to print the first name on the screen. So how I'm gonna do that? So usually what we do, we have the power to directly embed the properties. So I'll say users of 0, because 0 index I need, and it immediately throws an error, invalid expression, template expression doesn't allow computed property access. So this we can't do actually. Let's see the other problem. I have another property called num1, I have number 10, I have another property num2, and that is 20. And on the screen I want to show the multiplication of these two properties. So what I can do, as we know, we can embed the property directly, num1 multiply by num2, and this is also not allowed. So how I can achieve this problem? One way is like you can create another property and then you map that property like user first, and then you'll say this dot users of 0, and you start creating those properties, and that too will only update once, right? So to solve this problem, we come up with a getter, and getters are the methods that help you to render a customize or a manipulated data on the HTML. So let's create a getter. So I'll say a method name. First we'll create a method, first user. Suppose I create a method, first user. And to convert this method into the getter, we need to use the get keyword in front of the method. And now our getter is ready. So this method is a getter method now. And as I said, getter always returns something. So in return, I'll say this dot users of 0. So automatically John will come on the screen. So I'll go and bind this method on the HTML. Binding is similar. So I'll say first user. So I can write first username is John will get print automatically. Let's solve the another issue, the number. I'll say get multiply and will return num1 multiply num2, and as we are referencing the properties, it should be start with this and now it automatically update here. So let's change this method on the HTML as well. So now you can see we can write multiplication of num1 and num2 is this. So let's deploy this and see how it works. Same command sftx force source. So now it's get deployed, and in our page you can see it's printing first username is John and multiplication of 10 and 20 is 200. So this is how getter works. And the other benefit, like many people might think, like we can do the other way, like I create a new property like this dot first name first user, and I can map it like this dot users of 0. In this case, the problem is whenever the user dot 0 value gets updated, you need to update your this dot first user again and again. But in getters, whenever the value of users gets updated, first user automatically re-render in the HTML. You don't have to explicitly update the first user again and again in terms of getters. That's why we prefer getters for any validation checking or any string or any class appendation dynamically. Anything that you want to do dynamically in HTML, you always go with the getter. Other example that you may face in the real time, like if you want this user 0 to be in uppercase, so you can use to uppercase and you can append this method directly. So whenever the user comes and print on the screen, it will be uppercase. So let's deploy this and see. So there are many things, any JavaScript operation you can perform in your data, and that data you can directly send it to HTML. And anytime the property gets updated, automatically getter will update it and it re-render our component and print the updated data. So let's go on the screen now, refresh this. So now you can see John is printing in all capital letters. All caps are there. So this is how getter works. In real-time project, you will see the actual benefit of getter more. So, but I told you the difference why we are preferring getter over updating the individual fields. The reason is individual fields you need to update every time explicitly, but in terms of getter will automatically re-render and check the or track the properties value that has been changed or not. Okay, so now we have learned the getters. Now we know how data binding works, how method works, how data flow from JavaScript to HTML and HTML to JavaScript. So in the next video, we'll talk about conditional rendering. I'll see you in the next video.